Welcome to the 700 Club. It's bedlam at the border. The immigrant crisis is blowing up in Biden's face. So who is the president putting in charge to stop the surge? It's interesting. It used to be the Bush administration. It was the Reagan administration. It was the Obama administration. Now it is the Biden-Harris administration. And on several so-called Freudian slips, the president has called Kamala Harris the president. He's called her President Harris. Well, she's now in charge of this entire border thing. And 18 senators are also headed to the Rio Grande Valley to see for themselves what's going on. Meanwhile, who's exploiting this escalating crisis? Heather Sells has that.
As the border crisis escalates, President Biden is putting the vice president in charge.
When she speaks for me, doesn't have to check with me. She knows what she's doing.
The work will not be easy, but it is important work.
The president blames former President Trump for the mess, which has led to 16,000 children in U.S. border custody. But Trump ally Lindsey Graham says the Biden administration has lost control.
This is not Trump's fault. That's a bunch of BS. This is policy choices that were ill-conceived that have blown up in Biden administration's face.
Just released Border Patrol video shot last week reveals cramped conditions. This facility, meant to hold 250 people, now bursting with close to 4,000. Children seen sleeping on the floor under foil blankets. And now, the Hill reporting 300 children in custody with COVID who must be isolated. On Wednesday, members of Congress toured a new facility for unaccompanied teens. On Friday, 18 senators will visit the Rio Grande Valley to see for themselves what's happening. A Trump public health order allows the U.S. to quickly return adults and families stopped at the border. But Axios reports that Homeland Security numbers show officials sent back fewer than 15% of families last week.
So these are people literally crossing the border illegally as adults that are being released into the country, or that are 17 years old, that they're actually transitioning to another relative that's in the country also illegally and saying show up for a court hearing 2 years from now, which obviously most of those folks don't show up for the hearings.
Senator Graham said Wednesday that cartels are taking advantage of U.S. asylum policies, promising the very poor and desperate they'll have no problem qualifying. Graham's new bill would force them to apply for asylum in their home countries.
The asylum system is being gamed. The Secure and Protect Act will stop this.
In recent weeks, the administration has made more than 10,000 beds available near the border, with plans to open new facilities, including military bases in Texas, to house teenagers. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Listen, America cannot afford to take hundreds of millions of people, the poor and the needy all over the world, and make them citizens. We can't afford it. It'll ruin our country. But Biden has said, I guess they want these people to be voters in the Democratic Party or something. But anyhow, he's opened the border, and they know they're welcome here, and he's not going to stop them. And all he's got to do is say no longer, and he makes a deal with Mexico that the people get returned to the country from whence they came. But it isn't that way. That's the way it was under Trump, and we didn't have this crisis. But it is a humanitarian disaster building on our border. Why? Because of the words of the sitting president. Well, in other news, that same president has waited longer than any of his predecessors in more than 100 years. Today, Joe Biden will take the podium in the White House press room. So what can we expect? John Jessup has more on that story.
That is right, Pat. On his 64th day in office, President Biden holds his very first press conference. This long-awaited event prompted by questions about why it's taken so long for him to stand before reporters and answer rapid-fire questions. CBN White House correspondent Eric Phillips reports.
The president's long-awaited appearance could be one of the most analyzed, given all the talk leading up to it. It will be seen as a test of his ability to think on his feet under pressure, a test some claim Biden has purposely avoided, though the White House says he's just been laser-focused on his agenda for America.
Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you.
It's a promise brought up often by the president and his team.
When the president asked me to serve in this role, we talked about the importance of bringing truth and transparency back to the briefing room.
But some insist that hasn't happened.
Why hasn't he answered questions from the press at this point? Is it just that he's too busy?
I think he's answered questions, I believe the count is almost 40 times. So, and I would say that his focus, again, is on getting recovery and relief to the American people.
During a recent interview with ABC News, the president was seemingly candid.
So you know Vladimir Putin, you think he's a killer?
Mm-hmm. I do.
So what price must he pay?
The price he's going to pay, well, you'll see shortly.
He was very direct.
Yeah. On every single issue.
But some say a calm one-on-one or answering shouted questions while walking is not the same as facing the media music in the briefing room.
The president is somebody who has been kept on a pretty tightly constricted messaging streak lately.
He hasn't yet to hold a single official press conference. That is now officially the longest a sitting U.S. president has gone without a press conference in over 100 years.
Many have speculated as to why, some wondering if the West Wing is leery of the president making gaffes like this one.
And I want to thank the former general, I keep calling him general, but the guy who runs that outfit over there.
Whatever the reason for the timing, it sends a message from many that is opposite of transparent, especially when the White House won't call a crisis at the border a crisis.
Children who are frightened and crying, overcrowded conditions. Now that the public has seen that, is that not a crisis?
Well, children presenting at our border who are fleeing violence, who are fleeing prosecution, who are fleeing terrible situations is not a crisis.
When will reporters be allowed to tour facilities holding children who cross the southern border?
We remain committed to transparency.
CBN political analyst David Brody says during today's press conference, he and others will be watching and listening to the questions as much as the answers.
Because I think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny as to who he's calling on and what type of questions are asked. I do expect, obviously, quite a few stumbles from Joe Biden, but the bar couldn't be any lower for Joe Biden. Unfortunately, that's not a good thing.
During the campaign, critics said the president employed a, quote, basement strategy of not leaving his home for live events. Due to COVID, some said that might have been acceptable for a candidate. But now that he's president, there is little appetite for even the hint of avoiding the media. Pat.
Eric, what expectations do you think the president's got to meet in order to satisfy the American people?
I think there are a few of them, Pat. First of all, the president will need to come off as presidential tonight, right? That means appearing in a way that is competent, alert, knowledgeable, really on his game, something that could be difficult for him given his penchant for gaffes. He needs to come up with real, tangible answers for the American people tonight. I would also say he needs to demonstrate to the American people that he has stamina and endurance to last these next 4 years. Remember, we are just at the beginning of his administration. There's a long way to go with several crises we're dealing with right now. People need to be reassured that he is in this for the long haul, that he can go the distance. And then he needs to come off as a consoler. To that point, there are several things happening right now. We're talking about 2 mass shootings in the last week, a situation at the border. Also, people are hurting based on a lot of other factors, economic and COVID-related. The president really needs to come off as compassionate, which could be good for him because that tends to be his strong suit, Pat.
You know, Eric, we mentioned before, but on the White House web page and administration press releases, they're now calling it the Biden-Harris administration. I don't believe any last president has done anything like that. What do you make of it?
Well, Pat, I think there are really two schools of thought where this is concerned. The first is that the White House is really trying to highlight that team effort between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, right? In some ways, maybe resembling the lockstep relationship that Joe Biden enjoyed with his former boss, President Barack Obama, but taking it a step further. The second thought is that this could be an early setup for a 2024 run for Harris, assuming the president does not run for a second term, sort of a way to elevate her role. And remember, just yesterday, she was appointed to sort of honcho this immigration situation at the border right now. So we're seeing her profile rise. Perhaps all of this was even pre-established before they were inaugurated. That's just speculation, but we don't know for sure. What we do know is that this story will be told in the days to come, and we'll be following it very closely.
Well, one last question real quick. The 25th Amendment says if a president's incompetent, they can, there are various steps that can be made to take him out. Do you think that's in the offing? Do you hear any rumors of that up there?
Not hearing any rumors of that so far. Again, there have been several gaffes. We've seen them all. Some of them have even been made into jokes. So we saw the president stumbling up the stairs of Air Force One here in just a few days ago. And so there are some concerns that maybe he's not as alert as some folks would like him to be. But whether or not that really translates into some sort of cognitive impairment, some sort of medical or medically verified situation where the president is concerned, haven't heard really a lot of rumors about that, and certainly not anything that would elevate to the level of Congress taking action to remove him at this point. But again, time will tell that story as well, Pat.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Thanks for your reporting. John?
Well, Pat, Congress is clashing over proposed election reform. The Senate holding hearings Wednesday on its version of the House-passed H.R. 1 for the People Act. This week, big names in politics and media came to Regent University to address election integrity, particularly that House-passed bill. Paul Strand reports.
Regent's new dean for the School of Government kicked off the conference. Former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann said America can't allow national elections to be stolen.
Without an honest count of votes, we won't have a way to remove leaders that we don't want. And we won't have a way to get rid of laws that we don't like. Instead, a permanent group of elites will ensure their own continued power. And that will require you and me to live the way the elites tell us to.
Keynote speaker Ben Carson said he's appalled how people are being shut up now if they want any fraud wiped out going forward.
Even speaking about having honest and morally principled elections causes all kinds of uproars today.
A panel of election experts ripped into H.R. 1, a bill the Senate's now considering that detractors say would be a federal takeover of state election laws.
It basically throws open the vote to almost anyone who wants to pretend that they have a right to vote, who can vote twice, who can vote from out of state, who can vote if they're dead. Look, I believe in respect for our dead, but I also believe that we should have no representation without respiration.
It's just one bad provision after another. The whole intent of this law appears to be to make it easy to cheat, to make it easy to get away with it, and to make it almost impossible to detect or prosecute.
I like to say that H.R. 1 is unworkable, it's immoral, and it's unconstitutional. Sometimes I refer to that as the swamp trifecta. That's Washington, D.C. for you.
It's all a partisan power grab. There's not a single good idea in this entire 900-page bill.
And political commentator Mark Stein worries H.R. 1 could permanently warp American elections and democracy.
This is a recipe for a permanent one-party swamp, which is the ruling party and a controlled opposition in permanent minority status.
Stein suggests half the country permanently disenfranchised could be a powder keg.
Where we have groups of people who simply do not want to be in the same country with the other group.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Pat, it looks like this was a pretty successful event.
The response I'm reading about it looked like it was a home run with the bases loaded. I mean, it's really been
yes.
I mean, it was a wonderful thing. Michelle Bachmann is just extraordinary. She is now the dean of the school is named after my father, the Robertson School of Government, and she is doing it. But this conference is fantastic, so my congratulations. Hey, by the way, Regent is an incredible school. We'll be talking about it later on in the program, but I happen to be the chancellor of it, and I'm very proud of what they're doing. But this is one more example. We have the former chief judge of the North Carolina Supreme Court, and his assistant dean was head of all of the courts in North Carolina. We have 3 circuit court judges as adjunct faculty, plus 1 Supreme Court judge.
Wow.
I mean, it's quite a school.